Less than 4 weeks after Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, thousands of people set off on a pilgrimage towards 3 days of peace and music in New York City. But then the whole event was chaotic from beginning to end. The vision for Woodstock 1969. The Woodstock Music Festival started on August 15, 1969. The 3-day music festival was nicknamed an Aquarian Experience, 3 days of peace and music. This festival was the brainchild of 4 young men looking for an investment opportunity. They were John Roberts, Joel Rosenman, Artie Kornfield, and Michael Lang. Lang had previously organized the successful Miami Music Festival in 1968, and Kornfield was the youngest vice president at Capitol Records. As for Roberts and Rosenman, they were New York entrepreneurs. These men formed Woodstock Ventures Incorporated and decided to host a music festival. The original plan was to host it at Howard Mills Industrial Park in Wallkill, New York. But then Wallkill town officials changed their minds and backed out of the bill. They even passed a law stopping the event from being held within the vicinity. The organizers were frustrated at first, but explored other options. Just a month before the concert, Max Yasgur, a dairy farmer, offered to rent a part of his farm in the White Lake area of Bethel to host the music festival. With only a few weeks away, the 4 partners jumped on the offer without weighing the pros and cons. After Creedence Clearwater Revival agreed to attend, other big talents joined the train. This attracted nearly 500,000 people to the festival until things went out of control. From a lack of basic infrastructure to health hazards, Woodstock became a nightmare for organizers, attendees, and residents. Here's what I mean. The traffic nightmare. Let's begin with the first sign that things would go wrong: traffic. The traffic on August 15, 1969 was bumper to bumper. Nearly 500,000 people were heading to the same venue, and the 5 narrow roads leading to the site were blocked. People abandoned their cars on the road and walked miles to the venue. The police estimated that the streets were backed up for more than 20 miles. It wasn't just the festival goers that were caught in the traffic. Performing musicians were stuck there too. Organizers were left with no option but to develop a contingency plan. In this case, helicopters brought musicians to and from the stage. They also airlifted the sick or injured to nearby hospitals. The presence of the helicopters made the festival venue look like a war zone. Festival goers were scared and wondered if the government was spying on them. On the brighter side, these helicopters dropped flowers over the crowd and delivered more than 1,300 pounds of food, including 10,000 sandwiches prepared by members of the neighboring communities. It still did not change the fact that Woodstock 1969 was a logistical disaster that kept the entire town on lockdown. Not enough toilets. Aside from the traffic disaster at Woodstock in 1969, the event organizers missed out on another basic need that any large gathering should have. I'm talking about toilets, or good toilets in this case. For a crowd of over 400,000 people, the organizers had only 600 toilets. That is roughly 1 toilet to 666 concert goers. This meant that potty lines were a mile long, and the toilets quickly filled up. The frustration forced some people to relieve themselves outside. The mess plus the overflow made it extra disgusting. And guess what? The rainstorms helped spread the sludge and turn the music festival into a bacterial mudfest. An attendee described the site as a stinking swamp of human filth. This disgusting sight created a health hazard of unimaginable proportions. Food shortages. Food was another issue at the Woodstock Music Festival. Organizers initially expected around 180,000 people, but when over 400,000 people showed up, they were overwhelmed. Reports say the vendors ran out of food in 1 day. This left hundreds of thousands of people without food for the 3-day event. The organizers had to call in outside help. Thankfully, the people of Sullivan County were willing to help. After hearing of food shortages, they gathered thousands of food donations and airlifted them to the site. The package contained 10,000 sandwiches, water, fruit, and canned foods. Despite these efforts, many attendees did not have food. It didn't take long for frustration to set in. One of the food vendors, the hog farm, was overwhelmed by the number of people, and food prices skyrocketed. There were reports that it raised the food prices up to 400% more. Unsurprisingly, a group of attendees burned down that food stand in protest. Before we get to the next Woodstock nightmare, be sure to smash that subscribe button and comment "I subbed" to be entered into our monthly shoutout draw. This week's shoutout giveaway goes to Golden Ages. Thanks for being part of the family. And let's keep it going. Medical emergencies and drug overdoses. Food shortages and hygiene weren't the only health concern at Woodstock. Quality medical care also fell apart. The promoters hired 43-year-old William Abruzzi, a local general practitioner, to oversee the medical aspects of the event. Abruzzi hired 18 physicians, 36 nurses, and 27 medical assistants to work 8-hour shifts for 3 days. They worked in several trailers and a 30-bed hospital tent. As you know, this was insufficient, given the crowd size. The medical staff were overwhelmed with everything from heat exhaustion to drug overdoses. From LSD to marijuana and other substances freely circulating, there was no control over what people were consuming. This led to many medical emergencies. At the peak of the festival, nearly 800 people needed medical treatment. Even though there was a makeshift hospital in the venue, it was not equipped to handle the magnitude of medical issues that arose. Overall, 3 young people died at the Woodstock Festival. A New Jersey teenager was crushed by a tractor while sleeping on the ground. A Marine from Long Island died from a heroin overdose, and another individual was reported to have overdosed as well. The medical team recorded 938 foot lacerations, 135 punctures, and 346 foot injuries. There were 176 cases of asthma, 23 epileptic seizures, and approximately 250 patients were airlifted out of the site. These tragedies ruined the festival's peaceful reputation. Weather, rain, mud, and misery. If you've ever seen footage from Woodstock 1969, you've already noticed the mud. That's because during the festival, it rained heavily, turning the venue into a massive swamp. People walked, sat, and even slept in the mud for 3 whole days. The venue wasn't designed to accommodate large numbers, let alone the inclement weather. There were no structures in place to provide shelter, so attendees were soaked and covered in mud. Some were stuck in the mess, while others embraced the chaos with open arms. Attendees left Yasgur's farm filthy and dispersed. The aftermath and cleanup. So what happened after Woodstock? After the music stopped and the crowds left, organizers were left with a pile of mess. The figures were shocking. Over 2,000 tons of garbage were left behind, including clothing, tents, food wrappers, and more. But in a surprising twist, 8,000 people stayed behind to clean up. It took weeks to clean up the festival site, and the damage to the land was significant. Local farmers and residents who were initially excited about hosting the event were betrayed. The music festival was more of a curse than a blessing. Their lands were destroyed and their resources depleted. They knew they'd have to deal with the consequences for months. The organizers had promised peace, love, and respect, but the reality was far from that. Years after this sweet and sour music festival, residents did everything they could to ensure that Bethel would never host another music festival. Local farmers spread chicken manure over their land so that unwanted visitors would not walk there. But despite all the problems Woodstock 1969 brought, it maintained its status as a cultural icon. The festival is still regarded as a peaceful gathering of free spirits. However, the 1969 edition was a logistical disaster filled with preventable issues. From the lack of toilets to food emergencies and traffic gridlock, Woodstock was far from the dream. What do you think was the biggest disaster at Woodstock 1969? Share your thoughts in the comments below.